Hi, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the Spring Rights Literary Festival. I'm Robin Schwartz. I am the Community Arts Partnership Grant and Program Director. Spring Rights is one of our programs. And I know you know this because you had to go to springrights.org to register, but there's 35 more events through November, actually. So please check them out at springrights.org, and I'll put the link to the schedule in the chat. So today, this link is for a reading, which is about to start. And then at 7:10, the same link is for Literary Jeopardy, which I think is going to be amazing. So please stay for that. Some housekeeping throughout the event. The audience will stay on mute. If you have taken yourself off, please put yourself back on. And let's use the chat really extensively for questions and comments and engagement. I love seeing the conversations and engagement in the chat. It makes me realize that there are actually a lot of other people on the call. The bathrooms are down the hall. I would like to thank our wonderful Spring Rights sponsors, Ithaca College, Wegmans, M&T Bank, CFCU Community Credit Union, the Odyssey Bookstore, and the Ithaca Marriott. We also receive support from New York State Council on the Arts, and Poets and Writers helps us pay a lot of the participating writers. Although this festival is free, actually all of our programs are free, we always ask for donations to our general fund. So if you feel moved to donate any amount to the awesome Community Arts Partnership, I will put a link in the chat along with our website link so you can learn more about the Community Arts Partnership. Local celebrity Mickey Quinn is also on the call with us, acting as my technician. Mickey is many things, including an event producer. She runs Trampoline, Ithaca's premier monthly storytelling competition, among other events. And Trampoline is having a special curated night of storytelling as part of Spring Rights on the 13th. So check that out. We will begin. The first writer to read on this group reading is Mary Gilliland. And Mary's poetry has been anthologized in Nuclear Impact, Broken Atoms in Our Hands, in the multimedia Strange Histories, in the and Now Awards, the Best Innovative Writing, and in Wild Gods. You can find her award-winning collection, The Ruined Walled Castle Garden, in Ithaca bookstores. And I'm reading these bios from the Spring Rights participating writer page. And so you can go there and find their web links. So I'm now turning it over to Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi, thank you, Robin. And thank you, Community Arts Partners. And a very special thanks to Poets and Writers Incorporated for supporting my reading. Additionally, I'd like to thank the Community Arts Partnership for an individual SOS grant 5 years ago that made it possible for me to accept an invitation to be poet in residence at the largest contemporary art museum in the United States, Mass MoCA, where some of this got crystallized. So I'm reading several poems from The Ruined Walled Castle Garden, which is available at all independent bookstores, including both of Ithaca's. And there's more information at my website, marygilliland.com. My first poem from the book is Miracles When They Are Needed. This is a story of a model for art classes who was inspired by that early quote from the Guerrilla Girls. Quote, "Do women have to be naked to get into US museums? Less than 3% of the artists in the Metropolitan Museum are women, but 83% of the nudes are female." Miracles when they are needed. It was a way to eat in Periclean Athens and in 19th century Paris, and is now where I sit disrobed in an underheated room in Rockland County, subject to the winks and chuckles of suburbanites who stopped for drinks and kissed the wife and an exchange of business suits for leisure wear before the weekly evening class. Breathing and stretching, I rise from the pedestal, step to the gray floor, stroke a foxtail brush, mix pigments to set off the central figure on a canvas. A commuter sways in the primitive John that empties onto the tracks. Another swerves across the coupling into the caboose of German derivation, meaning a hut. His fellow, toward the periphery, clambers to the cupola, where he will overlook the train's forward rush, the windows static silver with momentum, the Times-screened profile of a brisk CEO, dandruff flakes on padded shoulder. A flesh-colored wad of gum flicked to the varnished corner aisle awaits the closure of a pickup broom held by the naked sweeper. The clock chimes, end of artist's break. I drop brush as door pushes open to the musty room, canvases on easels near identical. They file in smocks, mustaches, goatees, cherooting their accomplishments, expecting that my long legs will grace the platform, that my body will be folded on the drapery's folds. Fingers a fluid sweep as crowds murmur in my brain. On my way out the door, I purloin their supplies, watercolors, charcoal, pastels. Years breathe by, my dimples disappear. My paintings are presented. I cartoon my subjects, gesso my love for them, wipe my Turk brag on my need for them, braggarts and Don Juans who can't sit still. Passenger trains are shorter now. Crews walk freely through the cars, rendering an inspection lookout obsolete. The caboose has seen its day. I ready a frame for the fish that bites the apostle back when the loaves split 12,000 ways into crumbs on the water where a lone man walks. Rainbow oil rings surface on Galilee. Our next speaker is Nikola Tesla, the electric engineer who brought us alternating current. And I'm reading this particularly with the Spring Rights climate change theme in mind. Had Tesla been able to continue his research, harnessing the power of sun for free electricity, planet Earth might be quite different today. Tesla on a leash. You think the globe solid throughout, cobalt, treasure blue, ramming its way through galactic dust, life well used and passive, what's termed everyday satisfaction. Image the murky bottom, thousands of tons of waste from the race for the A-bomb. Make the land shift, the seas hold, the sphere clears. Its path, the smoked whirl of a cat's eye skating parquet. The litter bag need not be emptied. There's so little in it. That would be science. To be honest, nothing has fit since the fields of Croatia vanished behind me. The wheat in ribbed vaults, a cathedral, order and beauty, and that slight discrepancy, leaving the homeland to find whether I could come into my own. Years later, my mother was dying from a cold water walk-up in lower Manhattan. I saw her the way I see lines from the sun, grids of power ensouling the planet we stand on. Others seek greener grass, cloudier skies. For me, what fits is southern light, color streaming through an arbor, striking a jaw hinge, rankling earlobe and cheekbone, flushing an entire face. The actual world is worth all my appetites. When my patron, Morgan, realized that sun as the endless free generator would turn him no profit, when my no further funding letter arrived, when I left the electrical towers to dry in the desert. Wasn't that a cloudless day? The train I boarded swallowed me, black and white, enlarged and dry mounted, iron rails tenseled beneath iron wheels. Morgan's wallet spilled hundreds of households, his blueprint the future entered by accident, a breath floating by, or a momentary scent of rain. Utility. Detrained in a drab eastern city, I chose a hotel room and didn't come out. Daily I mumble, foregoing the lightning and rod, repeating the formulas, forcing my head to a circle like everyone else's. And the last poem is with the social justice theme in mind. The anonymous speaker of this poem is one of our essential workers. Guest in the neighborhood. I was on chicken surveillance that night, fowl to be roasted whole or split and fried, delivered to the busy suburb. My mind ran to last week's manifest destiny, wanting to return to the meadow, thrust into the newly green sun humming off the pond. Working the line, a private lake would have to fill in that longing. Then a night shift rooted its wishbone in my chest. I passed the guard, crawled the sidewalk, but a frenzy of messy barks, the beagle next door, had me turn. Each tray of hens was carried from the walk-in cooler, each carcass bathed, patted dry, set on the appropriate counter with a little clearing around it. That odd feeling of walking in place closed my throat. The inexorable remains of feeding on wages, hungry for wings. Thank you for listening tonight. Get your copy. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mary. That was great.
Thanks.
Next up is Stuelke. She is originally from Delaware. She met her husband in Baltimore after her latest band split up. Together, they moved to New York City. He went back to med school. They had kids. She got an MA in sociology and workshopped her writing at the Kenyon Review, novel writing, and Stowe Story Lab screenwriting sessions. She is currently the lead singer and lyricist for Solid, a local band. And she is my first musician on my Greater Ithaca Art Trail. I opened it up this year to all mediums. And so I scored a musician. Yay. So I'll turn this over to Stuelke.
No pressure being the only musician on the trail, but yeah, still figuring out how that's going to work. Don't really have a studio, but
yeah, I'm figuring it out too.
It's going to be epic. I can't wait. Thank you. More will join next year, I guarantee it. So my piece.
Uh-oh, she froze.
Got some freezing happening.
Yeah. Who said free? Was that you, Mickey?
Yes.
Maybe what we'll do, since she's now frozen, she'll realize it at some point, is we'll move on to the next person and then come back to her.
Okay.
And I'll send her. She was looking in the chat, so I'll send her something in the chat.
Okay.
So she knows what happens.
At least she froze on an attractive, like.
I know. It's a good pose.
Fear, right?
So next up, and watch for her if she comes back. We'll put her on mute. Gregg Weatherby is our next writer. Gregg is a poet, actor, writer, and editor. He also has been, there's Elizabeth. Looks like she's plugging something in. He has also been a deckhand, ranch foreman, bartender, and managing editor of Spin magazine. His previous poetry collections include Under Orion, Bone Island, and Approaching Home, a new collection of his poetry, Before We Forget, is forthcoming from Finishing Line Press. He lives in Ithaca. Take it away, Gregg.
Thank you, Mary. All of the poems I will read tonight are from my new collection, Before We Forget, due out later this year from Finishing Line Press. If you check me out on Facebook, release details will be forthcoming. Since we're short on time, I will read the poems with only a short pause between them, with very little comment whenever it may or may not be necessary. All of these poems have at least one metaphorical finger on the pulse of the planet. Equinox. First day of spring means nothing here. The earth starts its tilt towards the sun. Lake effect flakes fly from the northwest. The late night silence of snow offers 3 to 5 inches of no accumulation. The sky gray for days, and the light, what there is of it, throws its blanket over potential brilliance of snow. Fog is the angel's share, and the willow dips its fingers into the stream. No significant sun for days now. The windows rattle in their frames. Whether we like it or not, the earth bows to spring in its own good time. The COVID poem. April in lockdown. Late on a cold and windy afternoon, snow still in the air, trees bare, the time of the plague. After a long day at work, staring at the computer a month on under lockdown, the new sensations, face masks and enforced seclusion. I understand now the songs my father sang, only to himself under his breath. Why he was afraid, felt the chill all year long, why he stopped going to memorials. My age moves across me like the edge of dark on the earth. From space, you can't tell what we have done, the destruction, the species disappearing before I knew they were even here, the tired senselessness of it all, the coming dark, the silent cold. Massive moon lights the empty yard. I forgot why I was singing Happy Birthday 2 times. Buen dia, Macondo. 1 mile down and 90 days. Thick, sweet crude rushed into the sea. Deep water, clouded gas, volatile aromatics, and the air flows off the Gulf. Breezes cool the shimmering heat. Waves wash tar along the white sand beaches. Red muck on the tides, the seagrass, the coastal marshes. We believe stiffly in the wind, yet turn our backs to it. Oil-soaked seagull pecks at the slick-stained hull of a cleanup boat. Brown pelican coasts into the onshore breeze. Short term. Maybe the problem is we spend too much of our time looking down at our feet, or anyway, maybe just a little ahead, not far enough. Look where it gets us. Generations saddled with debt, super bugs, bad food, bad air, ozone, oil slicks into the sea's beaches, the Gulf tarred and feathered, running out of time and downhill. Will we disappear like the fleeting ghost of a dream, a jar of ashes tossed in the wind? Before we forget, driving after 3 months in lockdown along a familiar route, it seems there used to be more trees. Where did they go? Where is the shade, the summer breeze? How can there be bare branches lit up with yellow finches out my window in the afternoon winter sun when there aren't any? Trees, I mean. Why can't we leave them alone? When will they blossom and leaf this spring while we are locked down, doing less with less at home during the quarantine? Trees have disappeared from familiar roadsides. I realize I am no longer young. If there are no trees, where will the blue jay call in his complaints? What about the red and gray squirrels, or me on the balcony today, transfixed by the cardinal's red, the trees' breathing branches lifting, falling in rhythm to my own? Global warming. 10 straight days, no sun and cold, so cold it radiates off coats. Even inside, we huddle against it. Seems winter gets colder every year, maybe just old age creeping in through the cracks. Summer's cooler too, maybe another ice age cometh. The next great extinction, man. Oh man. Still the deserts push into verdancy. Ice caps melt, Northwest Passage free and clear. Glaciers disappear, islands sink in rising seas. Our lives thin, blood cools. So the hour grows late, bank the fire, try to find some comfort, some grace. Blue jay. Woodpeckers eat fashionably late at the feeder. The last of the oak leaves drift down, circling in slow motion. A blue jay lands on the railing and calls out. We regard each other. It is November, the first snow, and 25% of his species is gone, maybe forever. The snow mixes with rain, falls on his lost habitat. We regard each other in silence. Notes. No sign all summer of cardinal or little wren even. The leaves wave quietly, the TV silence, the politics of madness. The sudden return of birds signals a change of seasons. On the table, a book of poems, a book about birds. A magazine article says 1/3 are lost. There are notes that we cannot hear. There are notes that we cannot sing. Song. The sunrise begins to peek at the day. Each tree dances in the wind in its own way. Summer finally arrived. You leave one place to find another. Handful of memories while we have them, fading into darkness of legacy. Finches sing in the dense wood, you know, not where the song goes, not where it ends. I'll end with this one. It's called Birds. Not long in the future, standing among what's left of the trees, a young child will ask, were there birds? Do you remember the birds? What were they like? What language did they speak? What were their names? Is this their place? Where did they go? What did you do? Thank you.
Thank you, Gregg. Thank you so much. And now E is back. Welcome back. We will turn the mic back over to you.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Great.
It happens.
I told my teenager stay off, but he couldn't do it. So, but this is an excerpt of a chapter or a long scene from this work, which has had different lives as novel and a film. And it's now hopefully going to be shot as a short film, but this is just a piece of it, and it is called Gazelle Down from the Mountain. The larger piece is called The Lover. The cat patiently sat next to Sarah as she finished her tea and planted the next section of the garden. Sorry. I do apologize. She'd placed those irises her mother gave her in the last area near the end of the drive. Next year, she thought, their purple will add that needed touch of spring color to the mostly summer blooming garden. She liked the blooms mostly in summer. She loved the green of spring to last as long as possible. She wasn't in a hurry for flowers to break the pattern. The spikes and swaths, the curls and strands of green, once they broke through the mulch, were as welcome to her as an almost forgotten memory. By the time the plants started to wake, she was about to go out of her mind with worry that it wouldn't happen. What if this was the year all the perennials were devoured by the ground squirrels and voles, spiders and maggots, feasting as if the plants didn't matter to anyone but them, just as the days they would inhabit wouldn't matter to her if they never came. She tried to reassure herself the day would come and sprouts would finally unfurl through their protective covering. But as she peeked beneath the mulch to find the eerie green-white glow of the shoots as they labored to reach the sun, seeing them sapped of strength by the damp held in by the mulch, she thought of death. What must it be like to lie under the earth as it went through its cycles, breaking down, moistening, rotting, reclaiming? And she then gave only little thought to the other side of the cycle, enveloping, germinating, warming, opening to the sun. She thought the process impossible, and only part of it held genuine interest for her. She grinned despite herself as she sipped the last of her tea. The cat looked back as she gently, imperceptibly, except to the cat's ultra-sensitive fur, stroked it with one finger. Sarah gingerly lifted herself from the couch. Today was another day. She was thankful for it, but she understood it might be the last. That thought was how she started every day, if you could call it a start. In the storage room attached loosely to the back bedrooms of the small salt box house, the remains of broken toys, old planting pots, rusted bike chains, forgotten pieces of a spoiled life, indulgent of cheap hobbies, piled up year after year. From these piles, she chose her favorite trowel and bent for the thin metal handle of the plastic bucket next to it. As she straightened, she found she had mistaken the weight and swung the bucket up to smack herself in the lip with her knuckles. The jolt pleased her slightly as she felt blood start as her lip rebounded off her sharp teeth. As Sarah brushed her lip and saw blood smear with the dirt on her hand, she thought she was quite over doing the gardening this morning. But as she had nothing else she wanted to do, she thought she'd better get to it. The sun hit her as she rounded the house, shooting off the car as it rested tank-like in the driveway. How she wished that car weren't there. How she wished the old man had not brought it. She wished she hadn't brought a lot of things, which now took up residence in her mind and cluttered her house. She wanted to be rid of all of it. The furniture, the books, the pictures, the knickknacks, the booze, and the pillows, which, though they smelled so good to the girls, reeked to her of the house they had lived in and had to get rid of. The wind would pick up, and as she tended her flowers, and she'd think about the road stretching out in front of them, smiles on their faces as they looked out the windows, the fresh scent of stale cigarettes blown back at her from the dusty highway. She liked the smell of other people's cigarettes somehow. When it hit her just right, the smell of the paper mixed with the tobacco had a solid smell, which was not acrid and not sweet. It was just firm, and she liked it. She'd see a mountain up ahead and think about climbing it, if only to look back on the cars following theirs, to imagine who and what would be in them. She realized she was finally doing it. These thoughts were not too bad. She could handle this abstract view and entertain herself for a while, so she didn't think of the bad things. But as soon as she thought that, pop, the pleasant thoughts would disintegrate into a fading bubble around what was really blocking out the sun, and why she smelled the solid smell of smoke, and why the heat of the road was so close to her now. She was breaking through the passenger window with her foot. She felt the hot, sharp, and jagged piece of glass connect with her skin. She knew it was not her only injury. She heard the old man yelling, but then she realized it was her voice much too deep. She stood there outside the passenger door, yelling to the rest of them to get out of the car, get away from the car. There was no answer. This time she had been driving alone, with no mountains up ahead, only tall forest trees. She had smacked the car into one, head on, jamming the driver's side door. Had she been able to open it, she would have walked out into the open air. The car was on the edge of a ravine, stuck in the trunk of a tree. As she saw the car dangling there, she felt the carpet of pine needles give way as she sank to the ground. When Sarah got back to the house and went up the stairs at the back of the bedroom, overlooking the storage room, about the same time as Lem was facing the opposite direction, out back of the kitchen, under the grapevines on the patio leading to the storage room, she registered for the first time she was over this sickness. If she was going to talk at all, it was going to be now. "I don't love him," Sarah said to Lem as he sat at a small metal dining room table overlooking the front step and garden. He was not looking out at the flowers. He seemed to be looking at the screen on the window, inspecting it for holes. "I'm sorry, is that supposed to make me feel better?" is what she wished he'd said, as he leaned on the back legs of his chair, pushing until the back of the chair was so far away from his, she thought he would fall. "Well, Lem, I suppose not," she'd cry and look pathetic. He'd reach out a hand to stroke her cheek. She wouldn't flinch, and she'd let him touch her and then fall into his arms and cry some more. And the whole thing would be over. But of course, that is not what happened, and Sarah was actually glad. She wanted to tell him, but it would not go so smoothly. If she could actually get anything out of her mouth about it, try to sum up why, it would probably start off okay. But soon she'd trip herself up. She'd stammer. She'd sweat. She'd have a few false starts, and then she'd change the subject altogether, which, of course, would be fine by him. Lem did not want to hear the truth. He didn't want to know anything about what had happened. He also just wanted it all to go away. What he didn't know could not possibly hurt them, right? Far be it from Sarah to want to change things. She didn't plan on this thing, whatever it was, with Cecil. She just wanted to be happy, hang out, blow off steam from time to time, and go about her business. That her business was anything but business didn't bother her either. She wasn't a very enterprising person. She didn't really work towards things in a conscious way. She had always assumed the future would turn up. Why bother about it? This philosophy always suited Lem just fine. They met, fell in love, or something like it, and that was that. They began a life together, because that's what you did. But because nothing happened is precisely why it did happen, she thought. How could she let her life get so empty?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. Look, people are clapping.
Oh, look.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next is Dan Smalls. Dan is a concert promoter. His company, DSP Shows, produces over 800 shows a year in the Northeast. He took to writing during the forced year off due to the pandemic. In addition to a novel, has written stories inspired by walks. Hey, Dan, is FLX Finger Lakes?
Yeah.
Yeah, you wrote walks in the FLX. I'm like, well, I don't know what that is. And, you know, Dan is one of the many, many people that I've met who really ramped up output of creative things during this past year. You know, had you written before the pandemic?
This was pure survival for me. I 800 shows a year means you're constantly working or thinking about work or how to take care of people and artists and stuff. So this was for me. I went from full on to full off, and the winter was barren in a lot of ways. So this was just something that happened.
It is an opportunity to be creative. So I will now turn this over to you, Dan.
Okay, well, it's funny. This is one of the earlier stories that I wrote after the novel, which I don't want to. I only have a certain amount of time, and I think getting to the end of this story is good to tie it all together. So a lot of what I would say is captured within this. So this one is called Private Eyes, and here we go. It was sometime in the fall of 1982, I think. Memories are fuzzy from that period of my life. I know for a fact it was sometime before the bike accident, but after I started getting those strange tingly feelings around cute girls. I was about 12 or so then. Our basement growing up was late 70s cozy with deep shag carpet and some shade reminiscent of Crayola burnt sienna mixed with some weird blooming dandelion yellow. The couch was a sectional of brown leather and super soft, almost comfy, except where the frame for the pull-out bed was. If you sat there, your ass took a beating. There was a wet bar to one side of the room, mostly made of giant barnwood beams. The bathroom down there was super 80s chic. My dad set the crimson red sink in the top of an old wooden barrel. He was a plumber after all, unique for sure. In the center of the room was a counter, also barnwood encased, under which sat an inset television and a cabinet to the right side. Clearly, that's where the Atari was housed, as well as the parents' record collection. The walls themselves were also covered in recycled barnwood, painted a dark shit brindle brown, just like the rest of the rooms would. Who knew the Smalls were so ahead of their time, right? Eco from day one. But these outside walls were false walls, meaning there was a walkway behind them that framed the barnwood exterior between it and the concrete foundation. You had to know where the door was to find it. My sister and I always called it behind the wall, and it was a great place to hide. The highlight of the basement to me was a small stereo system and turntable for LPs, and no, we didn't call it vinyl back then, that was mounted on a shelf under the stairs. My prized 45s were on repeat in this period of my life, and like most 12-year-olds, my choices were dictated by what was on the radio at the time. And what was crushing then was Hall & Oates. Private Eyes, clap, clap, had come out the year before, and I had the single on 45. I will never forget that one because it was playing when I first kissed a girl behind the wall. As this pandemic wears on into 2021, I find myself walking outside nearly every day, mostly because it's winter in Ithaca, New York, and walks are easier than any other form of outdoor exercise when it's straight cold and snowy. Plus, it's pretty beautiful here, what with the lake and gorges. Today, as a song popped into the Spotify curated for Dan playlist, I realized that Hall & Oates have been a bizarrely unifying and recurring thread throughout various portions of my life. You see, I'm a concert promoter based here in Ithaca, New York, and my company does shows around the Northeast in varying genres and capacities from 200 to nearly 10,000. Before COVID in 2019, we produced over 800 shows every year, and about 300 of them played a small club in Pauling, New York, a small bedroom community on the Connecticut border about 30 miles northeast of New York City called Daryl's House. This is the spot where Daryl Hall records his television show live from Daryl's house, and he's a partner in the club. How this came to be is a story in and of itself. An industry acquaintance called and asked if I'd be interested in talking to a relatively new club that needed a talent buyer. That's the guy who books the acts who play there. When he told Daryl about us, Daryl thought we'd be perfect and wanted to talk to me directly. He rang me literally minutes later to try and convince me to take the gig. I was shocked to hear his voice and thought someone was fucking with me. It's not out of the question, for us crazy concert promoters to harass each other. In my mind, I want to say that I made him sing for me to prove it was him, but I don't really believe that happened. After that call with Daryl and his LA-based manager, I agreed to go visit the club and see how I felt about it after seeing the space. And yes, Daryl was going to meet me there. The site visit was a great excuse to visit my mom and spend the night in the Dirty Dancing Catskills, and then make the drive down to Pawling the next morning, which was only about an hour or so away. Route 17 East to 84 and some back roads, and voila, there was the wooden exterior of Daryl's House Club. As I parked, I took a deep breath and prepared myself to meet this legend of my youth. I never really get starstruck, but this one felt kind of big to me. This was a potential partnership with someone who had massive global success and was currently enjoying a renaissance. Can I admit I was pretty nervous? Sure. My nerves calmed instantly, though, when I approached the front door to find the 6-foot-plus wooden carving of Daryl that graced the entryway. It had the leather jacket and the sunglasses and even the hair. What ridiculously nice hair that statue had. When I heard those words in my head, I knew I'd be okay for the meeting. And long story short, we made a deal in principle that day, and the rest is history as the venue has become a top 100 club in the world over the last several years. And to answer the question, you're probably all thinking, yes, I did tell him about the makeout party in private eyes, but I'll get back to that in a minute. A few years later, when Hall & Oates toured the summer amphitheaters, I was able to get some pretty cool access and great seats. What I did not expect was the love my 9-year-old son developed for them, mainly because I think singing a certain song became the first curse words he was allowed to say out loud. If you're a fan of the band, you know this is all about Rich Girl. It's a bitch girl. Seeing them at Bethel Woods and again in Syracuse were super fun moments for us. And because life is best remembered as a collection of moments, these were big ones. Daryl even made time for us backstage after the show in Bethel. It was a great family picture before the ex cropped me out, but she and Daryl and the boy looked pretty happy anyways. Yes, I brought my ex-wife along to the show because yes, we get along like that. But it was not just booking his club or seeing their shows where the band has made appearances in my life. I cited Daryl repeatedly in a TED Talk I did back in 2017. I talked about our partnership and how my business mentality in relation to the rest of the music industry norms is basically, I can't go for that, no can do. And that if you thought and acted the way that others did, you're clearly out of touch because you're not going to innovate if you do exactly what others are already doing. The talk as a whole was about bucking the system and doing things your own way and building a business beneath the radar of the big boys in small cities who will support these grandiose ideas. I've been lucky for sure, but this talk told my story and shared deep insights, and Daryl was a part of that in his own way. The Hall & Oates overlap doesn't end there. I grew up a struggling New York Rangers fan, and like many, 1994 was huge for me when they finally won a Stanley Cup after 54 years. But since being in central New York, I've also found a love for the Maple Leafs of Toronto. Yes, sorry, Buffalo, the Leafs, a much maligned Original Six hockey team that hasn't won a championship in 50 plus years and are loved or hated just like the Rangers. Where's the Hall & Oates reference there? For the last several years, their goal song is You Make My Dreams Come True. It's hilarious when you consider the imagery at first, but having been in the Scotiabank Arena during the Stanley Cup playoffs with my son and cheering after a goal with 18,000 other Canadians while it played was beyond magical. Sure, it's not loud, aggressive, bone-shaking rock and roll like maybe you'd expect in a hockey arena, and maybe it's sort of cheesy, but somehow it works. And it fits a team trying to find its way, young and fragile with a legion of diehard fans and maybe a whole country behind them. And also some serious haters, because we all have those. Kind of like Hall & Oates. You either love them or, well, you know. As I dig through the memory banks, I remember so many other songs, like when Maneater came out and we watched the video on MTV at home on repeat after school. And the same for the textbook 80s and way ahead of its time camera work on the Say It Isn't So video. Their next album included the postmodern styles of Method of Modern Love, which again was all over the MTV. The crazy clouds, the cocktails with smoke, the dancing, and well, frankly, the hair in that video. We all wanted to be that cool. The 80s were a very different time. Daryl even almost busts a rhyme in the bridge section near the end, between his trademark South Philly falsetto, of course. Let's be straight honest, the dude can sing. Regardless of how you feel about their music, these songs dotted the soundtrack of our lives in the MTV era, the musical era before the real world came along and made music secondary and eventually non-existent on that breakthrough channel. And I couldn't discuss Hall & Oates without mentioning the hits Kiss on My List and One on One, which were middle school dance highlights for me, right up there with those massive ass grabber slow dances from Journey Escape. Which brings me back to the basement and behind the wall. We all have a first love, and usually those come from our cadre of our closest friends. At least that's what happened for me and my homies. The good news here, for me and my first real girlfriend, and skip ahead to us both turning 50 in 2020, 8 days apart, we're still friends to this day. We went to the senior prom as friends, but I'm sure we might have fooled around a little that night. I mean, who doesn't at 17, I guess? And we stayed close, and it didn't affect our friendship. We went to Cornell together and supported each other as we got to know life away from home. And we Zoom every few weeks or months through this pandemic with a bunch of our other friends. I may struggle to remember many things before my bike crash, but that first party in my basement is indelibly etched on my memory. When she and I went behind the wall and learned what French kissing is, we were doing that to the tune of Private Eyes, clap, clap. Hopefully no one was watching us, but we laughed and loved and felt happy and sad and pain and release and all those crazy busting hormone feelings that came with becoming a teenager and learning about big person feelings. Slowly and respectfully. She and I had our ups and downs over the years, but we'll always share some wonderful memories and firsts. And who could have known on that fateful night behind the wall that Daryl Hall would become a client of mine, and dare I say, someone whose number is programmed into my cell phone, and who might just answer if I call. It's crazy how life unfolds, and when I walk and pass the time while I wait for my real life to return, I realize that my real life is right here. And the inability to do my chosen work right now may suck, but we will soon produce shows again. And I've learned to slow down and appreciate these connections and threads of my life that without this break, I may never have had the time to notice. What I've learned is to keep my eyes open wide, my private eyes open wide. They're always watching, and that's a very good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much. I actually had an idea while you were talking about maybe doing a Zoom event and inviting artists in Tompkins County to share what they learned about their creative work during the pandemic, or even maybe just a show and tell. And you actually just inspired that idea. So thank you very much.
Now I'm going to go back to the shadows behind the curtains where you don't see me anymore.
Great. And you'll wait till you retire to start up the novel again. The next is Clara May Barnhart. Clara May Barnhart is a poet and writer from upstate New York. Her first book, Susie, Susquehanna, and the River Valley Blues. I want to read it just because of the title, actually. It's being published in 2021 by Main Street Rag. Links to this and other work can be found at claramaybarnhart.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for having me. Thanks to everyone. It's been really nice listening to everybody read tonight. The first poem I'm going to read is an older one. It's not in my book, but it is my mom's birthday, so I have to read it for her. So this is called Sunday School. I was baptized in a mountain spring alongside my cousin Nick. My mother was the saint who spread holy water across my head, her fingernails filed and the half moons white and freed from her cuticles. She always said she wasn't sure about God. The pads of her fingers are dry from dish soap, cheap soap. White vinegar and water cleans windows and countertops. Whole milk is good for the bones. Children are gifts from God, she would say, if God is up there. Her touch feels like what a cloud looks like, same as sticking your hand in a pot of flour and feeling it sift through the tucked and folded skin hidden in hard-to-reach places. She would let me fall asleep with my hand on her neck in the soft, rounded special spot under her chin where I could feel the steam of her pulse rising with our dreams, heartbeats in rhythm. She and her sister baptized their baby dolls at the spring. The water sprouted from the earth and fed their family. They cupped it in their palms and splashed their faces bright and flushed. Two little girls in paisley dresses, saddle shoes, hair combed by the cornstalks they cut through, hands sticky with the sweat of holding another. It was the clearest, coldest water in the whole wide world. It was infected with E. coli some years later. My brother helped my cousin Nick rebuild. They fastened a cover to keep the bad things out. Sometimes I move the rocks that hold it down, stick my head in there, dip the tips of my hair in the water, and watch the waves unravel and fray. I listen to the echo of the water buried deep, churning, blurping, writhing in the stomach of the ground. This is where God would come if he was thirsty, if he could be thirsty. This next poem is called Catching Ties. I hadn't been fishing with my father since the time when we were kids, and I caught the sunfish he gutted on the bank with his jackknife while I shivered in my life vest next to him, 7 probably, the seat of my pants wet from sitting in the middle of the canoe. I watched him slit open the belly, the pink and gray entrails splashed out in a connected web, separate from the white flesh we would fry up later. Somehow it still tasted of the river, and I liked it. He still has to hook my worm. I still have the urge to pull the line up every few seconds so that the little thing can breathe. Today, we are spitting sunflower seeds and sitting on coolers full of Labatt Blue, staring at the calm water of the Cannonsville Reservoir in Fly Creek. Our descendants should be buried underneath in what was Beerstown, where his father was born of the Barnhart Smiths. I imagine a post office, clapboard with an American flag still waving with the pondweed 80 feet down. Their town was leveled to make way for the drinking water of the greatest city in our state, this country, of this earth, here, this water, not a motorboat in sight. Somewhere downstate, a man is using it to knead his famous pizza dough. A woman is misting her terrace garden with it, growing Asian pears 30 stories above the sewer where it runs like the tributaries that it came from, here, where we are sitting, and you are breaking the silence with, "Did I ever tell you I had an Uncle Boots?" "Yeah, he lived over here, him and Aunt Mary, real backwoods people. I mean, real backwoods, missing some teeth, real scary looking, nice people. All they ever did was fish. He was always wearing boots, that's why they called him that, Uncle Boots." "What was his real name?" I ask. "Hell if I know." He pulls the tab on another can, and the pop of it echoes across the lake. A thunderhead looms above the pined skyline, but over here all is blue, unassuming and calm. I throw a rock, and he tells me I've scared all the fish away again. "No, I'm scaring them back over this way," I say. "Is that how it works?" he answers. "Don't matter, just nice sitting here." An hour later, he catches a bass, but he caught a buzz first, and he slips a bit on damp leaves and pine needles on the steep bank. He sings, "Drown another worm, drink another beer at the Cannonsville Reservoir." I laugh. "You just make that up?" "Well, sure," he responds. "Where do you think you get it from?" Okay. This last one, it's another one from my book. This is called The Thing Is. The thing is, there's a coarseness to me. It's in the way I lick my fingers at the dinner table and wipe what's left on my pants. It's in my dad's old stained shirts I like to wear on the weekends with big sturdy boots. And it's the swear words I use, not the F word too much, too tidy, lacking the good humor of shit, damn, and dickwad. It's in the fact that I love restaurants where you can still get a fountain soda in a plastic cup and a BLT for $4. I like Slim Jims and beer in a can and soft serve ice cream. I like dogs that are unbathed and don't listen very well. Cats who leave dead chipmunks at the door. People try to attribute it to my working class upbringing because I played in Poppy's barn, skinned my knees on the gravel floor, sat on the worn out seat of his forklift, pretending, wore my brother's hand-me-downs. In winter, my mother would mix flour and water and we'd play with it like clay, happy in front of the white radiator in the kitchen. Sometimes I can see that it grates on people, this thing. There's a momentary intake of air, a hard blink, their head maybe tilting away from me slightly, like I just let one rip in the middle of polite conversation, like I'm an English PhD who hates Shakespeare and cries at Folgers commercials, but the thing is, I am. My mother doesn't drink or smoke, not ever. She likes British things and animals. She buys us all books for Christmas, serves on the library board. And once when I was 17, wearing tight, low-rise jeans and almost nothing else but a push-up bra, she said, Clara May, you don't need to go around showing off everything you've got. I don't get it from her. My father is half Italian, has been almost bald for as long as I can remember, but still he always combs his hairs. Once when I was 17, about to leave the house in pajamas, he called me a slob, said, "You act like this at other people's houses." He's always shaking his head at me, in pride and shame alike. I didn't get it from him either. But my older brother, he's got it too. He thinks deodorant is junk and hasn't spent money on style since he was 14 and realized that the yellow Oakley sunglasses he bought at the fair were not only fake, but ridiculous looking. We got it together somehow right around middle school when you're going to turn one way or the other, when the popular girl in 8th grade made fun of kids who wore Kmart clothes, and I sat across from her at lunch, not saying anything, wondering if my blue shirt was nondescript enough to escape her. The thing is, it's so easy to learn this not saying anything. It's what people tell you about your class that breeds it. My brother and I both sank first into the sweet act of not caring, later absorbing a stubborn pride in all things that prove that even though we button our collars and try to iron our pants, the thing is, we're still happy with flour and water, and the world can never steal our stink. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. That was wonderful. Thank you so much.